Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today to talk about grief and what is seeking healing at this time in the wake of the November elections. I've kind of framed this talk in a way that is just about grief in general, but in the aftermath of any election, we can have grief. So just kind of keep that in mind. I don't need to know how you voted. I'll begin with a little story. 2 days after the elections, I had lunch with 3 women I have known for over 30 years. At lunch, one of the women asked me, "So how's work going?" And I said, "Gosh, I have had so many requests for support the past few days from people experiencing post-election grief." To which one of the other women rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, please, as if that's a real thing. What is there to grieve? I just looked at my stocks this morning and they're way up." In response, one of the other women said, "Hey, you can grieve anything, the loss of anything that's important to you, and that includes when who you want to be president doesn't win." This verbal exchange was followed by a long silence, which was then followed by an amicable discussion on how each of us had voted and why. Grief is an individual experience different for everyone. Whether you experience grief due to the death of a loved one or following an election, the same question needs to be asked, answered, and processed. What is seeking healing at this time? Grief healing is a dynamic process defined as a subjective shift within us in the midst of pain and suffering, even if the source of that pain and suffering cannot or has not yet been removed. Grief and the process of healing can trigger many uncomfortable feelings such as anger, or thoughts such as confusion, or even physical sensations like deep fatigue, and all of which are normal and necessary, and that's important to know, necessary responses to loss. The uncomfortable symptoms of grief aren't good or bad, but rather they are informative. They are messages from the body, mind, spirit telling you that an experience of loss is seeking healing, is seeking a shift in consciousness, is seeking to be processed so that you can return to inner balance or inner peace. So, what is the path to balance and healing? In the field of grief counseling, we put aside that whole idea of the 5 stages of grief that was so prominent until about 15 years ago, and probably everybody's heard of those 5 stages. But it was put aside due to the recognition that the 5 stages really hold no application to the individualized nature of grief. As a grief counselor, I tend to expose my clients to 3 specific models of grief healing, as well as journaling, healing art, even the chakras, whatever needs to be looked at. The grief recovery method is the first model, and I find this model most effective for people who are dealing with losses due to divorce, or what are called incomplete communications, which are things like forgiveness. The second model is called continuing bonds theory. And continuing bonds is most helpful for people who have lost a loved one to natural death, to disappearance, or to violent death. In continuing bonds theory, we do what's called relocate. We relocate our loved one in heaven, in our hearts, in our minds, or in the activities that we do to continue a bond with them after they die. The third model is the 4 tasks of mourning or grieving. This model has application for all sorts of losses, including election loss, so we'll be looking at that today. No matter the source of your grief, mourning is the process of gradually adapting to loss so that healing and moving forward with life can occur. The 4 tasks of grieving provide a structure that supports that adaptation process. The first task of mourning is to accept the reality of what has been lost. And that's a very individualized thing. When a loved one dies, the communal gathering of friends and family at a life celebration is a ritualistic event that helps you to start to accept the reality of loss, at least intellectually. However, taking in the full emotional and day-to-day impact of a loss really kind of gradually unfolds over maybe weeks, months, even years. Allowing yourself the time, space, pace, and support for this unfolding is key to adapting to the pain of loss and moving forward with life. Allowing yourself time, space, support, and good pacing is also key to adapting to the pain of an election loss. A first step to coming to accept the reality of an election loss can be the sharing of the pain of that loss in a compassionate, judgment-free zone, whether within your faith community, family, friends, or with a counselor. And I'm not talking about engaging in grievance spewing, just emotionally vomiting, but rather a thoughtful, heartfelt sharing of why what hurts. And again, that's very individualized. Naming what hurts and why helps to define what is seeking healing. Examples of what is seeking healing might be emotions such as ongoing anger, or loss of hope, or a sense of powerlessness. Or it might be that you have thoughts stuck in your head like, oh my gosh, our democracy will not survive this, or anybody who didn't vote like me is an idiot, and we can't get those ideas out of our head. So I would ask you all to consider as a first step, trying to name what emotions, thoughts, sensations, or spiritual doubts are seeking healing at this time. The second task of mourning is to process the pain of loss. The painful emotions and thoughts you identify as symptoms of grief, no matter the source, helps connect you in understanding to the importance you hold regarding what was lost. We do not grieve things that were not important to us. Processing the pain of loss requires that you focus on working skillfully with suffering rather than trying to stop or avoid it. Skillfully working with suffering is the essential work of grief processing. There can be no spiritual bypass, no jumping over grief to get to the other side of it. Jumping over grief, when we try to do that, is when we get stuck in grief and things remain unprocessed or unhealed. Working skillfully with loss requires that you maybe learn new skills or explore or deepen such practices as meditation or mindfulness or self-compassion. I think that's essential, or prayer or journaling or art making or movement or walking in nature, whatever resonates with you. Engaging in skills and practices that resonate with you allows you to learn how to, what we call, ride the wave of grief. Riding the wave of grief means that you learn how the ability to traverse distressing moods and emotions and thoughts by cultivating the ability to sit in or with discomfort. And most of us like to avoid that because it's uncomfortable, right? So when we learn how to ride that wave of grief, we learn how to sit with discomfort. And learning to live, which will help us to take to task number 3, which is learning how to live in a world in which our loss has occurred. And I would add, really learning how to live in that world with renewed hope and peace and love. To fulfill task number 2, I ask you all to consider as individuals or as a faith community, how will I or we go about healing my or our manifestations of grief, if there are any? And what new skills, if any, will I or we need to learn in order to heal? If a loved one has died, task number 3 entails adjusting to a world without your loved one in it. In terms of election-related grief, task number 3 entails learning to adjust to a world where those in power don't necessarily share your worldview and the values that you hold most dear. In order to return to and continuously choose ongoing inner balance, a commitment to both external and internal adjustments may have to be made. So when someone dies, a typical internal adjustment can include things such as coming to terms with changes in identity. If I'm no longer a mother or a sister or whatever, then who am I? What am I without that role or identification? And it can also mean making adjustments to our spiritual beliefs or our values and the way that we view the world. All those things need to be looked at to come back to inner balance. Examples of possible election grief-related internal adjustments for members of your faith community, and I know a lot of you, to contemplate could include working through resistance or examining what this loss experience will teach you that you need to know. There's nothing that can't teach us something that we need to know. If you so choose, external adjustments might include taking on new roles and developing new skills needed to traverse the challenges of a new era, perhaps in the areas of social justice, or climate change, or women's reproductive rights. I know your faith community is committed to inclusion. That said, I would ask you to consider if any internal adjustments need to be made regarding including in your inclusion mandates those who have political views and values different than your own. Expanding ideas of inclusion to embrace those who hold vastly different worldviews might give your community a better understanding of why the election turned out the way it did. And that knowledge might help you define an approach for dealing with vastly different ideologies. Task number 4 of grief healing is to move forward with what has been lost. Moving forward after an election-based loss entails engaging in acknowledgement and acceptance, the acknowledgement and acceptance of the death or loss of a desired outcome or even a dream. How you do that is up to you, but engaging in rituals and activities that resonate with you can be effective in jump-starting renewed hope and renewed meaning regarding what has happened. And so I will end with this example before we do our guided meditation. After the 2016 election, an artist friend of mine deeply engaged in social justice issues regarding immigrants felt great sadness and despair over who had become our new president. To explore this response, she became my grief client for a while. And when she felt ready to move forward, she hired me to do a retreat for her and 30 of her artist friends. We called the workshop Visual Journaling, Creating Images of Peace During Times of Fear. In the workshop, we explored in succession 4 emotions that everybody had identified as needing looking at: fear, anger, acceptance, and then images of inner peace. And we did these on door-sized paintings in which you move into the painting through movement to explore these emotion-based paintings. We also did writing exercises with it and guided visualizations. My friend has since died, but 2 people who attended that workshop years ago in 2016 or 2017 recently contacted me to say that that workshop had had that lasting effect of taking them through this current era, and that they really could feel acceptance for whatever comes their way since that workshop. So that's really the essence of grief processing, being able to get to the other side of grief by slogging through the emotions and the difficult parts so that we can see something that we maybe couldn't see before. This is really an example of moving forward, but also allowing loss to be a transformative growth experience, which it always can be if we choose to allow it. That said, I would ask that everyone here to consider that your spiritual life purpose is the same now as it was prior to the election. And that is self-realization. In other words, accessing a felt sense of oneness with all that is. And that would include you, your inner source. We are all part of source. What also hasn't changed is the way in which you manifest light and love in the world and grow in self-realization by engaging in and sharing your gifts, your talents, your passions, your unique essence of light with the world. So with that in mind, we will now do a guided meditation that I did on election night for a spirituality center. We did it on Zoom, and I've shortened it, but we will do that now. So I would ask everybody to get comfortable in your seats, comfortable with the way you're sitting, and really feel your bones heavy in your seat. And when you're ready, gently close your eyes if that's comfortable. If not, then just cast your eyes forward and focus your attention on your breathing. Notice where the breath is most prominent in the body and gently place your focus and attention there. Breathing in and out, in and out, in and out, a little slower and a little deeper than normal to comfort. Continue to notice the breath going into and out of the body. Nothing else exists in this present moment but your breathing, your sharing of this breathing space with those who also wish the best for themselves, others, and the world. As you sit now, allow yourself to sigh out loud to release any tension held in the body. Notice how just the act of sighing can bring a sense of greater inner ease within the body and mind. Focus your attention on your feet and sigh quietly out loud, imagining that your feet are sighing out any held tension. Focus your attention on your legs and do the same thing. Sighing quietly out loud, imagining that your legs are sighing out any held tension or anxiety about the state of the world. The only thing that exists in this moment is your breathing, your sharing of the gift of breath, and the sound of my voice. Move your attention to your torso now, the abdomen, back, and chest, and once again quietly sighing out loud and imagining that this area is lightening up, any tension or held stress released through the simple act of sighing. And finally, bring your attention to the head and neck, and once again allow a gentle sigh to release any remaining tension in the head, neck, and body. Imagine now a sphere of light like the sun shining in the space in front and above you. Let this sphere represent the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual qualities you most wish to energize and embody in your life and in the world at this time. Vividly imagine that you are soaking up all the rays of this light source and its energies of relaxation, calm, clarity, and inner strength, as though you were sunbathing. Feel these rays soaking into you, pervading your body and mind more deeply and completely with each breath. Let feelings of calmness, inner strength, and harmony grow and glow deeply within you. Now imagine that this shining, luminous sphere sends light tendrils out into all corners of your community and the United States, and then stretching to all corners of the world, to all the sources of inspiration, healing, and harmonizing energy you need and that is needed at this time. Imagine these rays of light drawing back into the sphere above you, rays imbued now with all the healing and harmonizing power that exists throughout space and time. Let those rays pour back into your personal energy field, charging it up into a crystal that showers you with the light of a billion suns. Imagine this brilliant light energy streaming into you, completely dissolving all your tensions and pains, all your worries and fears, healing and opening the places in your body, heart, and mind that seek inner balance and peace and acceptance. Feel the inner shadowy clouds of fear about the future vanish in this flood of brilliant light. Feel any inner fog dissolve completely into a vitalizing calm within. Imagine the shining sphere of light coming even closer now, pouring its light directly down into you. Let it come to the top of your head. Feel a shower of cleansing, healing, purifying light flooding you, washing completely clean and clear, healing you in body, mind, and spirit and emotions. Vividly imagine your body as a light crystal. Imagine light pouring through you now, shining from your heart, through your eyes, through the pores of your skin, flowing out into the world. Tidal waves of healing, helpful, shimmering crystal light shining to you and from you, shimmering crystal light flowing through you and out into the world. Experience yourself now as a radiant being. Experience the peaceful power of this way of seeing yourself as an agent of positive change, bringing light to the world. Imagine that these waves of positive feeling are like a clear crystal light that can reach out to others in ways that bring relief, inspiration, energy, or whatever else they may need. Wherever you direct your clear and loving intention, let there be blessings. We will now take a minute to breathe together, integrating within us the intention of love and light we will bring forth into the world. As we close this meditation and sermon, bring your awareness back to your breathing, noticing the breath coming into and out of the body. Notice the heaviness of your body within the seat that you're sitting on. When you're ready, open your eyes at half-mast and then open them fully. Thank you. Activist L.R. Nast. Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break, and all things can be mended, not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you. And that is you. Thank you.